Blessings to all. Share this YouTube for everyone to see and kick the neck.
51. Mahasilava Jatak. Asingsetiva Puriso, na Nibidya Pandito. Pasami wohing at Thanam, atya iting Tata Hoti. And once upon a time, Lord Tiloguru Buddha, who had virtues as abundant as the earth, lived in Devaram Vehira. This Jatak is for one monk who has the courage of reluctance. He said, "The Almighty is true to you. That's the way to judge whether you're the hero. Lord, since when did the sages leave this kind of Narayanism and learn from it? Let it be said till the end whether the former sages who have declined from their state and who have danced from their valor will be the same ones who were born in Yashasa." On the last day, when a king named Brahmadatta was ruling the city of Varanasi, our great bodhisattvas who had full bodhisattvas conceived in the womb of that king's late maidservant. The days of giving names to those bodhisattvas are blessed if virtuous princes go. At the age of 16, he mastered all the arts, and in the last half of his life, his father came to the kingdom and became known as the great virtuous king. The righteous, they rule by dharma. That is the Sataravasal door of the city of Rajuru. At Kandy intersection, they go near their palace and give alms to poor passers-by beggars. Constant penance. It looks like they are living. Shanti Maitri is kind and they rule righteously, making all beings happy as if they make a child happy. At that time, a commoner of the king's became famous for his recent work in the palace. The ministers also informed the king. The king examines himself and summons the minister and says that he has done something unwise and unworthy of the inhabitants of my colony. He left the country saying that he would flee to another place, leaving behind his property and his sons. That minister left the country of Kasi and served the king of Kosol. The king gradually became convinced internally. One day the king of Kosol was called king, and the kingdom of Varanasi was like a beehive. The king was very wise. It was said that they would accept to leave the kingdom of Benares with a small army. When the kings heard his words, the kingdom of Benares became great. He also refused to take the kingdom with a light force. Who as he thought that this was a Charapurusha sent by the king and said, "Are you a Varapurusha?" "Your Majesty, I am not a character. I'll tell you the truth. If you don't understand my message, send people and build a village on the ground." When he caught the people attacking the villages and brought them close to him, he gave them the treasures and said, "Shut up." The king who heard this said very bravely. Thinking that Vana will be tested, he sent men to kill and loot a village in Pasaldanav. The children saw the thieves who killed the people in that Pasal. He asked why the village was robbed. "Lord, why did you not come close to me until now?" He gave them resources and told them not to do this from now on. Those people went and burned the king of Kosol. Those kings did not go this far and again abducted a colony in the middle. The king of Benares sent resources to those thieves as well. The kings of Kosol did not go this far and sent men back to kill and loot people in the middle of the streets. The kings also sent resources to those thieves. At that time, the king of Kosol, knowing that he was a very righteous king, took the kingdom of Benares and set out with his army. At that time, when the great Satirja of the king of Benares came before him, hundreds of thousands of thunderbolts, who did not run away, and who were virtuous and never panicked, when there was an intention of the great king Shilava, who was able to open the kingdom, about 1,000 did not run away from each other. Great giants have whenever he hears that the king of Kosol is going to war, he goes to his king and says, "The king of Kosol will take the kingdom of Benares." Lord Some H. He did not let our kingdom come down to the limit and said that he would crush his father and catch him. Hearing that, the kings are because of me, children, there is no use in oppressing others. Let the state take whoever it likes. Therefore, you are under the bait. The kings of Kosol crossed the border and entered the center of Danav. The ministers went back to the king and said the same. Kings are forbidden in the first place. The king of Kosol sent a seat to the great king from Pt city saying that the kingdom or God and war would be done. When the kings heard that, they would not make war with me. He said that he would take the kingdom. Again the ministers went to the king and said, Your Majesty, we will not attack the city of Kosol. They said that they would cut off the father and arrest him. The king opened the door of the vassals of Valaka city in the first instance and sat on the throne on the top floor of the palace along with 1,000 ministers. The king of Kosol, who came to Varanasi with a great army, without seeing a single animal that was his enemy, went near the door of the king's palace, escorted by the crowd of ministers, and ascended to the top floor of the palace, which had an open door. Alvayavar along with the 1,000 ministers, the king and the 1,000 ministers tied flour and took them to the raw grave and buried them in a bucket. So if they were unable to raise their hands, they buried them in the ground and asked if they would come at night and do the good that was done to them. Humans heard the news of the enemy king and sent the king along with the 1,000 ministers in fear. At that time, the great kings of Shilawar did not even attack the enemy kings. When those 1,000 ministers were tied up like this, it was impossible to keep the king's word. Thus, the Parshad of that great Bodhisattva is also a very decent Parshad. After that, the princes of the enemy kings with their ministers went to the grave of the virtuous king, who was digging a grave about 1 carat deep. At that time, the ministers of virtuous kings advised them not to be angry with the enemy kings but to be kind to them. At that time in the middle of the night human flesh karm hai kanahillu avahu. Seeing them, the king and the ministers shouted at the same time. They fled in terror. Those who looked after him again went back knowing that there was no one coming after him. In the pit, the humans also cried like the first time. After running away 3 times, the onlookers saw that not one of them was coming, and they did not come to the torture. Chief Kanahila went to the king. The rest went close to other ministers. The king, who was skilled in strategy, allowed Dahan to know that he was coming close to him. He lifted him up and grabbed his lower throat. He squeezed as hard as he would when taking a drag on a cigarette. Kanahila, who was simply pulled and squeezed by the powerful king, was unable to save himself and cried out in fear of death. The ministers were unable to tell Sampa that the rest of the ugly boys had been caught by one of the men who had gone to his house and were afraid of death and fled. Kanahil, who was taken away by the king's neck, went to Sipala in the distant past. Those Kanahilas were afraid of death and removed the king's chest with all 4 legs. Knowing the situation in which the kings were standing, the strong people who had the strength of elephants, bowed to their backs, raised their hands and raised their faces like a cloud that was blown away by the wind. The ministers covered the soil and lifted them all up. At the same time, the human beings took a dead body to an open grave and put it in the middle of the boundaries of 2 devils. We cannot share this body without sharing the body of those 2 devils. This virtuous king is righteous. He will share with us. The king said, Please share this body with us. The bodhisattvas at that time say, O virtuous devils, I will distribute this body to you. I am not pure. Therefore, the first Kotanami said, Even though the devils took the scented coffee of the enemy kings with their own inspiration, they gave it to the kings for bathing. After taking a bath, the king was given a robe from the enemy king, and a casket was brought to the king who was wearing the robe. The king, who was wearing perfumes, was given a gold sword, a palm tree, and many flowers were brought. They asked what else to do with the flower-clad kings. The king indicated that he had 6. The demons went and brought and gave food to the enemy kings with various delicacies. The kings dressed themselves in perfumes and ate other types of delicious food. The devils fed the enemy kings with the sweet-smelling bread and brought the golden disc from the Savani Binkara. After that, the bodhisattvas, after drinking the wine, washed their mouths and washed their hands. They asked what else to do while eating betel. He went back and brought the wedding sword to the enemy king. The wedding sword was also brought. The king took the sword and stood the dead body upright and cut it in two with the sword on the top of Isu and divided it between the two demons. The sword was washed, sheathed and hung on the shoulder. After that, those devils ate human flesh and filled their stomachs with happy hearts. O king, what else can you do? They are critics. If so, take me under your inspiration and put me in the bed of the enemy kings. These ministers were taken and planted in their respective homes. Those devils promised to give good, Lord, and did the same. At that time, the enemy kings were sleeping on the head of Sri Yahamastaka in Sri Yahasto. The king struck the enemy king with his sword in the stomach of the sleepless one. That king Risfu woke up in terror and said to the king who had raised his courage and rose from the bright world like a cave, O great king, how can you come to this Yahat Mata with a sword in a place where there is no permission from the guards of this building with the guard taken on a night like this? After hearing this, the king of Silawar explained the time he had come. Hearing this, the enemy kings were disheartened and said, O great king, even as a human being, I do not know your virtue. O king, whose virtues were known by the fierce and cruel demons who devoured the flesh and blood of others, now I do not doubt you, who possessed such noble virtues. When the sun rose, all the army and the ministers were disembarked like a Brahmin gathering householders and raising a pavilion in the sky in front of him. Salavar extolled the virtues of the king, pardoned the king again and betrayed the kingdom, and from now on, if there is any danger from your born enemies, it will be entrusted to me. They said to those who said, Eat your kingdom from the protection I have taken, and took their army vehicles and went to their own kingdom. The kings of Silawar, dressed in all their ornaments, under the white canopy, sitting in the golden pavilion with feet like the legs of wild beasts, looking at their wealth, I have danced with my mighty power to see if such wealth and the benefit of the lives of 1,000 ministers will not happen. I will also grant life to the 1,000 ministers. Certainly, the object of desire is not only courting, but also working hard. Thinking that the merits of the valiant beings who have done it will be like this, those great Bosthanas and the fruits of the valor of the virtuous will be like this. Lord Buddha, the teacher, delivered this sermon and declared the Vadara Chatursatya. At the end of the Chatursatya, the monk who had the courage to hesitate, rested in the Ahat Phala. Sarvajna completed this Mahasilava Jatak by adjusting the previous joints. At that time the evil minister is now Devaditta Sthavirayo. 1,000 ministers are now the group of Buddhas. He said to himself, Am I the king of Tiluguru Samyak Sambodhu, the king of Mahasilava,